The whispers, the sideways glances, the barely hidden smirks, he'd seen it all before. But this time, the men mocking his uneven gait had no idea the truth behind his injury, or that the very limp they laughed at was the reason they were still alive. Private Marcus Carter walked with a limp, a slow, uneven gait that made him an easy target. The other soldiers in his new unit noticed it immediately. "Look at him, dragging his leg like an old man," sneered Corporal Hayes, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Did you get that limp from running away?" Another soldier laughed. Marcus kept his head down, ignoring the taunts. He had heard them all before. Day after day the jokes continued. They called him gimpy and mimicked his walk behind his back. Even during training, they'd smirk when he struggled to keep up during runs. "How did you even make it into the Army?" Hayes scoffed. Marcus never responded. He just kept working, kept pushing through the pain. Then, one night, Sergeant Reynolds, a grizzled veteran who had served with Marcus in his last deployment, overheard the ridicule. His face darkened. "You think his limp is funny?" Reynolds growled, silencing the room. "Let me tell you why he walks like that." The soldiers fell quiet. A year ago, Marcus's unit was ambushed. Enemy fire had them pinned down, no cover, no escape. A grenade landed right in the middle of them. Reynolds paused, his voice tightening. Marcus dove on it. A stunned silence filled the barracks. The grenade was a dud. It didn't go off. But the shrapnel from the gunfire that followed tore through his leg as he shielded his squad. He took 3 bullets, dragging his wounded brothers to safety. He refused medical evacuation until every last one of them was secure. Reynolds locked eyes with Hayes. "So yeah, he limps. Because he was willing to die so that men like you could live." The shame in the room was suffocating. Hayes couldn't even look at Marcus. The next morning, Marcus woke up to find his boots polished and his gear neatly arranged. Silent apologies from men who finally understood the weight of his sacrifice. From that day forward, no one ever mocked his limp again. Instead, when they saw him struggling, they fell in step beside him, slowing their pace to match his. Because real strength isn't in how fast you run. It's in how far you're willing to go for others. And Marcus had already gone further than any of them ever would. Weeks passed, and the unit's attitude toward Marcus had shifted entirely. The jokes stopped, the mocking glances disappeared. But Marcus remained quiet, never bringing up the past, never demanding respect. He just kept working harder than anyone else. Then came the live-fire exercise. The drill was simple. Navigate through hostile terrain, retrieve intel, and extract under enemy fire. But halfway through, things went wrong. An explosion rocked the training field. Real explosives, not simulated. A training mishap had triggered an old, undetonated mortar shell buried in the dirt. Chaos erupted. Smoke filled the air. Screams echoed as soldiers scrambled. "Medic, we've got men down." Through the haze, Marcus saw it. Hayes, the same soldier who had mocked him mercilessly, was pinned under debris, his leg bleeding badly. 2 others were dazed, stumbling blindly through the smoke, and then gunfire. Real gunfire. A group of armed insurgents, hiding in the nearby hills, had taken advantage of the chaos to ambush them. Marcus didn't hesitate. While others froze, he moved fast. His bad leg didn't matter. The pain didn't matter. He dragged Hayes free just as bullets chewed up the ground where he'd been trapped. "Stay down," Marcus barked, shoving Hayes behind cover before turning to the others. One by one, he pulled them to safety, returning fire when he had to. His aim was precise. His movements were sharp. This wasn't the gimpy they had laughed at. This was a soldier. When reinforcements arrived, they found Marcus bleeding from a graze on his arm, still shielding Hayes. His weapon trained on the tree line. The insurgents had fled. Hayes stared at Marcus, his face pale. You could have left me. Marcus just shrugged. Not how I operate. That night, back at base, Hayes approached Marcus. No smirk. No arrogance. Just a clenched jaw and a shaky breath. I don't deserve what you did, Hayes muttered. Marcus looked at him. Doesn't matter what you deserve. I did it because it was right. Hayes swallowed hard. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Marcus took it. From that day forward, the unit changed. They didn't just stop mocking Marcus, they followed him. When he struggled on runs, they ran beside him. When his leg gave out during drills, they helped him up without a word. And when new recruits made the mistake of laughing at his limp, Hayes was the first to shut them down. You don't know what that man's been through, he'd growl. And if you're lucky, you'll never have to. At their graduation ceremony, Marcus was given a commendation for bravery, not just for the ambush, but for the training incident. As he stood there, his unit cheering louder than anyone else, the general leaned in and said, "Men like you don't just save lives. You change them." Marcus smiled, because he knew the real victory wasn't the medal. It was the brotherhood he'd earned. And this time, no one would ever doubt his strength again. Years later, long after Marcus retired, Hayes, now a sergeant himself, stood before a new group of recruits. One cocky private smirked at a soldier with a slight limp. Before the kid could even speak, Hayes grabbed him by the collar. "Let me tell you about a man named Marcus Carter." And the lesson began again, because true courage isn't in how you walk. It's in how you stand up for others, no matter the cost. Years after Marcus Carter retired from service, his name had become something of a legend at Fort Bragg. New recruits would hear whispers in the barracks, stories about the soldier who walked with a limp but moved like a lion when lives were on the line. Now a civilian, Marcus worked as a self-defense instructor for at-risk youth in his hometown. His gym, Iron Will Combat, was a refuge for kids who needed direction. Gang members, dropouts, and troubled teens who had never known discipline. One evening, as Marcus was closing up, a familiar face walked in. "Still dragging that leg, old man?" Marcus turned to see Hayes, now a battle-hardened master sergeant, leaning against the doorframe with a grin. Marcus chuckled. "Some things never change. What brings you here?" Hayes' smile faded. "We've got a problem, and I need your help." A former member of their old unit, a young soldier named Ramirez, had fallen into bad company after being discharged. He was last seen with the Sangre Negra cartel, working as hired muscle near the border. "The brass wants to write him off," Hayes said. "But I know if anyone can get through to him, it's you." Marcus didn't hesitate. "When do we leave?" The desert heat was brutal as Marcus and Hayes crossed into cartel territory. They weren't there officially, just two veterans on a personal mission. They found Ramirez in a dingy bar, flanked by armed men. When he saw them, his face twisted in shame. "You shouldn't be here," Ramirez muttered. "Neither should you," Marcus replied. Before they could talk further, gunfire erupted. A rival cartel had launched an attack. In the chaos, Ramirez took a bullet to the shoulder. Marcus and Hayes dragged him to cover as bullets whizzed past. "Why? Why'd you come for me?" Ramirez gasped. Marcus tightened his grip. "Because no one gets left behind." Fighting their way out, Marcus's old instincts kicked in. Despite his limp, he moved like a shadow, disarming one attacker, knocking out another. Hayes covered their retreat, laying down, suppressing fire. When they finally reached the extraction point, Ramirez was pale from blood loss. "I'm sorry for everything," he whispered. Marcus just nodded. "Save your breath, soldier. You're not done yet." Back in the States, Ramirez recovered. With Marcus's mentorship, he turned his life around, eventually becoming a counselor for other struggling veterans. At a ceremony honoring Marcus for his work, Hayes took the mic. This man taught me that real strength isn't in how you stand, but in how you stand up for yourself, for your brothers, and for those who can't." The crowd erupted in applause. Marcus, never one for speeches, simply said, "We all stumble. What matters is who's there to help you back up." Today, outside Iron Will Combat Gym, a plaque reads, "Walk with purpose. Fight with honor, and never let pain define your limits." And if you listen closely, old sergeants still tell recruits, "You think you're tough? You wouldn't last a day keeping up with the limping lion because of legends like Marcus Carter." They never really retire. They just find new battles to win. Years rolled by like a slow, steady march. Marcus Carter's hair grayed, his limp grew more pronounced, but his spirit never wavered. His gym, Iron Will Combat, had become a sanctuary not just for troubled kids, but for veterans, cops, and anyone who needed a second chance. Then, one quiet morning, the news spread like a whisper through the streets. Marcus was gone. A heart attack in his sleep, quick, painless, the way warriors hoped to go. The church was packed. Former soldiers, now older, stood rigid in their dress uniforms. Gang members he'd pulled off the streets wore suits they'd never imagined owning. Kids he'd mentored now grown, some with children of their own clutched tissues and shaking hands. Hayes, his back still straight as a rifle barrel despite his age, stepped forward to speak. His voice was rough, but it carried. Marcus never asked for thanks, never wanted praise. He just did what was right, every damn time, no matter the cost. He paused, jaw tight. He saved my life twice. First, from my own ignorance. Then from a firefight neither of us should have walked out of. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. As the service ended, an elderly man in a worn-out army jacket approached the casket. His hands trembled as he placed a faded photo on the polished wood, a black-and-white snapshot of Marcus, young and grinning, arms slung around his buddies. "In Vietnam. You took that bullet for us in '72, the old vet whispered. "Never even knew your name till today." Turns out, Marcus had been saving people longer than anyone realized. At the graveside, a lone bugler played taps. As the final note hung in the air, Hayes snapped a salute, not the crisp, by-the-book kind, but the slow, deliberate salute soldiers, reserved for the best of them. One by one, every person in uniform followed suit. Then the civilians did too, some awkwardly, some with tears streaming down their faces. That night at Iron Will Combat, the lights stayed on. The gym doors remained unlocked. Because before he died, Marcus had left instructions. Keep the lights burning. Someone always needs a place to find their strength. And so they did, years later. When new kids ask about the photo behind the counter, the one of the old soldier with the limp, the answer is always the same. That's Marcus Carter. They called him the limping lion. Let me tell you why.